Welcome to Meeting of the Moms, a place to talk about all the things. I'm Amy Rasmussen. I'm a teacher by profession, a wife and mother by choice, an optimist by nature, and happy by design. I'm here with my good friend Lorna, who I call one of my greatest cheerleaders.
Hi, I'm Lorna Adams. I'm a wife, mom, and certified life coach. I strive to embrace and enjoy each new phase of life. Here at Moms, we believe the world is wide open to all of us and that we have unlimited potential. We're so glad you're here.
At Moms, we really do talk about all sorts of things. In this episode and the last one, we dive deep into our shared identity as disciples of Jesus Christ from the perspective of our religious beliefs found in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In the last episode, we explored exact obedience, personal revelation, and the journey of discipleship. We recorded today's episode about a year later in order to add some additional thoughts. We'll look at obedience through our different responses to inner and outer accountability.
I was listening through the last episode that aired. I was thinking about some things that I almost wish I would have said on the episode, but they didn't, like the thoughts didn't conceptualize when we were recording that last episode. And it was the one that you were talking about, obedience and obeying exactly. How would you summarize that last episode?
Well, it came about because I was working with one of my sons to get ready to go on a mission for our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And one of the things that people kept saying to him and giving him advice was to be exactly obedient. And I realized as I kept hearing it that that phrase could cause someone to tend towards a perfectionistic way of applying it.
Yeah.
And that was concerning to me. And so in that last episode, I kind of explored like, okay, what does this mean? And what quotes were being used and what's the context? So that's what we discussed last time. Is that helpful to kind of place
Well,
us?
and I think I was in that space like when I was high school, college, early marriage, even, I mean, for a while into my marriage, I think there was a lot of things that felt black or white. Either you do it or you don't. You're either obedient or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over the years, because of various experiences I've had, I've come to understand it isn't exactly black or white on most things.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been helpful for me because when I'm sitting in that perfectionism, I either am or I'm not.
Right.
That feels really heavy, right?
Yep.
Like I either am obedient and I am maybe spending time in my scriptures every day for 15 minutes, or if I don't get to 15 minutes, then I am not doing things right. I am wrong. I'm doing things wrong, right?
Yes.
And I don't believe that. I think there's way more like personal interpretation. I think more like working with God and finding what feels right and good. And I think one of the ways that I've come to understand that a little bit more is because of different experiences I've had with people. You know how they'll put a deadline, like you have to sign up by March 1st. And then on occasion, you find out that actually was just an arbitrary deadline. They just wanted to get the money in by then. But if you're March 2nd, it's totally fine.
Yep.
So I think that started to open up my eyes, right? And then I would have other conversations with people, maybe people in charge of other things. And they're like, well, what do you think? And how do you feel about that? And then it was like, oh, I actually can have a say, or I can actually, there doesn't have to be a right or wrong way. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, I feel like a few of those things over the years have continued to shift my perspective to where I think sometimes focusing on exact obedience can feel super heavy and not helpful.
Right.
And so and as I've watched myself shift, it has felt so much better.
I think what's interesting about when we take a phrase like exact obedience, which really does sound pretty precise, right? It sounds pretty precise. But when we take a phrase right like that and we start applying it to so many things, then what happens is exactly what you said with we begin to see black and white thinking. And then even if in one aspect we can see that there's variations, like, okay, yeah, not everyone has to study the scriptures 15 minutes every day. But since I decided 15 minutes was what I was doing, then I can't count it and say it's okay if it's 14 minutes and 59 seconds. And so we almost start taking it and applying it to all kinds of situations that actually makes no sense. And I've run into it a lot as I interact with people. One friend set a goal to be in scripture 80% of the time in a certain time period. And as one does, this person fell off the wagon, like we all do at times because we're human. And then they're like, okay, wait, I can salvage this, I can get back on. I mean, I said 80%, but then they did the math before re-engaging, and they found out that even if they were perfect from that time on, they'd be at like 79% or something. And so psychologically, for any of us, that feels very, very defeating. Um, and again, it's because we're stepping into this perfectionistic mindset instead of focusing on what is my desire to do here. If my desire is to be in the scriptures, like that was my own personal desire to be in the scriptures, then how am I going to do it and not turn it into an exact thing that is a black and white thing where either I knocked it out of the park or I completely failed. And then it has something to do with my worth and how good I am
Yes.
and
Yep.
all of those
Totally.
things.
Well, and I've kind of held on to this idea about adding drops of oil to a lamp, like an
Mm-hmm.
old school lamp, right? And I love that because whether I'm in, let's keep going with the idea of the scriptures, right? If I'm in the scriptures for 1 minute or 15 minutes, yeah, maybe there's a little more oil, but there's still some oil. There's a drop and then a couple more drops maybe or whatever, right? And so I love that idea in that something is better than nothing.
Yep.
And I still am making progress, right? That it doesn't have to mean I'm not doing any, like I've done it all wrong or I failed, right? It can still mean I'm making some kind of progress.
Yeah. And what's interesting for me is there are times when I can say that I have checked that box, I have done that thing, and yet it has not been as life-giving and as helpful to me as some of the small moments where my intent was way less about making sure it happened and way more about connection. In this case, with scriptures, like connection with God. And I changed wording at some point from reading my scriptures to sitting with God. You and I've talked a lot about that in our own conversations off the air, but that helped too. So this kind of highlights, I would say, Lorna, one of maybe our fundamental differences. And this also comes from Gretchen Rubin, who I refer to all the time, everybody. But she came up with a framework called the Four Tendencies. And it's not a full personality thing. The only thing it is about is how we respond to expectations. And she says there's two kinds of expectations, outer expectations and inner expectations. And how we respond to them really, really makes a difference in how we do life. And it's really fascinating. And she has a quiz, so you could go take it if you wanted to. She's not a sponsor. This is just me loving the Four Tendencies. But what's interesting is that the largest group of people, as far as who's taken her quiz, the largest group of people tend to respond really well to outer expectations, but they struggle to hold the line with inner expectations. And then the second largest group responds really well to inner expectations, but tends to push a little against the outer expectations until such point as they've decided to kind of internalize that expectation. Now, there's two other tendencies, which I won't explain now, because these two tendencies are you and me, the ones I just explained. So, Lorna, do you want to talk about the one that's you and how you see that coming up and how it relates to this whole thing?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I'm more of an obliger. And so as somebody is saying you have to do it this way, I would personalize that and be like, I have to do it that way. It has to be exactly how they've said it. And so then I've been able to loosen it up as I've noticed that about myself and then and felt like it's way more pressure than I want. And so then I've been able to shift it and made some things like some things or put some things in order to help me work with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm the other group. So that's the largest group is obligers, those who respond really well to those outer expectations. And so Lorna finds herself having a lot of similarities with that group. And I tend to be in the other group, the group that responds really well to inner expectations, but kind of pushes against those outer expectations. And that group is called questioners. And one of the favorite words for people who are questioners is, well, why? That's one of our favorite phrases. And so, I mean, over and over again, as Lorna and I have been friends and talk about different things, often it comes up that I'm like, well, why? Why does it have to be that way? Does it have to be that way? Do I really have to sign up by March 1st? I mean, I'm just going to make a quick phone call and find out if that's even true. Um, which, which could sound ludicrous to a lot of our listeners, especially if they're more in the obliger camp. They could be like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you make the world a rough place to live." And you know what? Sometimes I absolutely do. And sometimes I get analysis paralysis. And sometimes when I run into other people who are questioners, I have a son who's like me. I don't want to be questioned because I already thought through all the things. And so I have the answers. So it can show up in a really, really helpful way. And it can show up in a way that's super not helpful. Would you say the same thing about your tendency?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes it can be super helpful. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing that because it's important and other people are doing it. They expect it of me. All right, I can get it done. I can make it
Yep.
happen. Right. But
Yep.
then sometimes on the inside, as I'm like, oh, but I really want to do this, it doesn't seem to work so well.
Yep.
I don't seem to make things happen as much in that way unless I have some things in place.
Right.
I
Yep.
was going to just say too, I was having a conversation with a daughter and she was interacting with someone who was totally a questioner. And I was able to say, hey, I totally get this personality. Just know this person is asking lots of questions because they just want to know.
Yep.
Amy is this way. I've learned how, like, it doesn't mean she doesn't believe me or she doesn't think I have good ideas or whatever. She just is a questioner. She's just going to ask lots of questions and
Yep.
just see. And so it was interesting to have that conversation with that daughter because that she was feeling almost like attacked.
Yes.
And I could shed some light on. I think this is just maybe the way she's wired and she's just asking lots of questions. So
Yep.
anyway, kind of a fun real world experience that I was
Yeah.
able to share because of what I've seen in our own friendship.
Yep. Yep. And it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true that at times I realize when I step back, I'm like, oh my word, that person probably felt attacked. Like, and I've learned to tell people, hey, I ask a ton of questions. And they're like, okay, like they think they can handle it. And then, no, I'm just kidding. And then I start asking, they're like, whoa, wow, okay. Like you really ask a lot of questions. I'm like, yeah, I do. And it's not that, it's like you said, it's not that I'm questioning that you have good ideas or that you've thought about it or whatever, but that's how my mind goes. And then add to that the fact that my mind does it at kind of a hyper speed, I think you would say,
Yeah.
Lorna,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh, I've
not even
said that
like,
to you for sure. Your
whoa,
brain
yeah,
works different than mine. Keep going.
yeah, but it's not even like slow questions that are coming. It is like bam, 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 bam. And so it can definitely feel kind of weird, right? If you're the one receiving it. So, um, but I think that's even helpful. It's helpful with things like this. So I remember with the exact obedience stuff that part of it was I was wondering, why do I just have this ick feeling as my son is being told this over and over again? And I think part of it is because he is more like you, Lorna, with the obliger thing. And so I'm seeing this being like, this is going to get heavier and heavier and heavier for him. Like, we got to loosen this up a little bit because I have no question that he is going to go out and try to do what is being asked of him. Um, because sometimes at different times people have had to say to me, I don't know why, but I feel strongly I should do it this way. And I'm like, okay. Like that, sometimes that's all I need to hear. It's okay. But I can also sense that they think they have to have this well thought out answer, and sometimes I'm a little more demanding of that. But there are times where I can be like, I can take that. I can take. They're like, I don't know all the reasons, but I do feel strongly about it. But this particular son is not necessarily going to be asking like, why are we doing this and why are we doing that or whatever. He's probably going to be a lot more like trying to apply all the things And so you give that to someone like him or like you, and it can become extremely heavy. And then it can take an ugly turn into the perfectionism.
Yeah.
Whereas for someone like me, I'm going to be pushing the whys anyway. And so sometimes I really do need to hear, like, I know I can't even explain all the whys to you, but this time, will you just do the thing? Right? Like, just like be with me on this one and give it a try, and then we'll talk about it and see if we can see some of the whys about it.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. And it is fun, I think. I think it's fascinating to see how our brains can be so different about
Mhm.
some things and so similar also,
Yeah.
right? And this is just one of those there's these tendencies that we do
Yep.
typically, and some are wired this way, some are wired this way, and how it can be helpful to know, right? And so even just for our listeners to be mindful of, like, where do you sit? And
Yep.
neither has to be a problem.
Right. Yep.
But maybe that'll help you understand yourself a little bit more.
Yeah. I love to, if anyone decides to go and look at the Gretchen Rubin stuff, I love that when she talks about it and talks about the other two as well, because there's four of them, she says every tendency has amazing things that they bring to the table. And
Hmm.
every tendency has things that can make life really hard for themselves and everyone around them. So she's not trying to put them on a hierarchy of one's these are better and those are worse. It's just that they're there, and and then how can we engage with the world and engage with each other in a way that hopefully highlights the positive things. Because I would say it's not that I'm just like, well, nobody ever tell me what to do, I'm never going to obey anything anyone says or whatever. I actually want to do good things, but at the root of me wanting to do good things is that question, because once I internalize something and I'm like, yep, internal expectation. Like, get out of my way, everybody. It's like, I'm going to do it and it's going to happen. And so you and I could actually be out doing something and it could look like we're both doing the exact same thing. But underneath it, for you, it could be like, they asked me to do it this way. And so I'm going to do it this way. And underneath it, for me, I could be like, yeah, we're doing it this way because of this and because of this and because of this, and it makes sense, right? I'm gonna have this whole thing, and yet we're both out there working together, Amy and Lorna, doing the thing. Um, and so that's interesting too, that it can look different, and we can have some kind of the reasoning underneath it and what's motivating us is different because of how our brain engages with expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
Do you have anything else you want to throw out there that came up when you were listening to that last episode?
I guess the one of the things too, I realized that communication can be so helpful.
Mm.
I mean, all the time, right?
Right.
But then especially with things like this, like what is how do like do I want to be obedient? How can I be obedient, right? If it's back to the exact obedience, right?
Yep.
I don't feel like the exact obedience is helpful. So what am I going for? What do I want to be doing? And even just having conversations. I think sometimes having conversations with leaders or people in charge that are asking for things can be helpful. Like,
Right.
tell me what you mean. I have also heard of the idea of sometimes things are taught, like for missionaries specifically,
Mhm.
sometimes they're taught to all the missionaries this way.
Yep.
And then as they're having the one-on-one conversations with the mission leader, then they can say, okay, but for you, let's do it this way.
Right.
And I think that can be so helpful because we all do have different tendencies of
Yep.
how we take things on and how we feel about implementing it. And so that can be very helpful also.
It makes me think maybe of kind of an overarching vision. When you're talking to everyone, just like if I'm talking to all three of my boys, that's not that big of a group, but it's still three individuals, right? Um, you give kind of the overarching information. And then to sit with the individuals and saying, like, okay, how do you apply this? And how do you apply this? And how do you apply this? Um, because that that's where we can really get down to the everyday kind of behavior that
Yeah.
we want to do.
Yeah.
And I think in relation to obedience, and exact obedience specifically, words are important to me. And so as I can dig and find out what does it mean to me, and then like you said, have some conversation. I mean, that's what we did in our last episode, right? I'm like, Lorna, trying to wrestle with this. Like, let's talk about it. So I really appreciate you being willing to talk about it. But then if we're talking to the people who are maybe outlining the guidelines or asking us to do certain things, sometimes we can find out that we're on the same page. It's that application looks different. And so this
Yes.
happened for me once when Um, we had some very specific things sent out by a church leader. We call them a stake president. A stake president is over many wards. So a ward is like a congregation, and then a stake is kind of in charge of multiple congregations. And they wanted to have some goals, and they'd sent out an email. And the beginning of the email was kind of like this, there's just this vision of like, hey, this would be good to do. And I'm like, oh, cool. I have some ideas of how I could apply that. And then in the next couple paragraphs, it went into some very specific how to do it. Like, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. And I remember, and you probably remember too, Lauren, because I talked to you about it a lot. But part of me was like, what? Like, that is horrible. That is not going to work. Anyway, it was just ick. Like, I didn't like it. I ended up talking to one of the people in that leadership, and we kind of visited about it. And what I realized is that for some people, it helps them so much to have a specific game plan. Like, okay, I don't have to like take all the energy to figure out what's the game plan. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. And for me, like a lot of questioners, I'm all about customization. And that's why the beginning part is what I loved. And so it's taken me time actually to get to a point where I can be like, so that beginning part was for the me's of the world, right? The me's of our group of congregations. And I could look at that and I could be inspired and I could choose what I was going to do. And then that game plan, that really specific game plan, was for the other people who were like, thank you for giving me just something to shoot for that's super specific and easy so I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that I guess that's just another interesting example to me about just our different tendencies and how things hit us and how then we can wrestle with it and explore it
Yeah.
and hopefully come up with something that feels good
Yeah.
to move forward
Yeah,
with.
I totally agree. Well, and I think where we do strive to have a relationship with God, I think including him on all of that.
Yep.
That, hey, this is really hard, and how do I do this? Or, all right, this is what you're asking me to do. All right, I'm doing it, or whatever, right?
Right.
But I just think even communication with God as we're working through things can be so helpful too.
Yep. And I love that I can do that. And I can be like, well, you know where I'm at here. This part's really irritating and I really don't like that. And what about this? Like, is this really a time when I need to say, I don't know all the reasons, but I'm going to do it anyway?
Yeah.
Or is it okay for me to be doing this digging? And
Yeah.
so often it's just fine for me to do the digging. And it actually really helps because once I know the why and once I'm on board with the why, then like I can be your greatest ally.
Yeah.
But it is really hard for me to jump on and be an ally if I'm just out here like not knowing and people just want to
Yeah.
say because I said so. I'm like,
Well, and I love it in that sometimes I can be like, all right, I'll do those things. Like, you're asking me to
right,
do those things. Okay, I'll do those things. And then sometimes it's that, like, I wonder why. Like, what is this for? Why? You know what I
yeah,
mean? I think sometimes that can come a little bit later with
right,
communication with God, with other
yep,
people sometimes. But it does seem like my tendency is more to be like, okay, they're asking us to do this. Okay, let's make it happen.
yep,
So it is,
yeah,
and it is good. I think both can be so good, right? But then it
yep,
is nice to have that reason that's in our hearts to be doing the things because then it does make it way
yep.
easier. And
And
then it
as
can
a
be
oh, you
improving
finish.
us, right? Like then our hearts can be changing for the good if we're doing it that way too.
Yep, yep. And as a person who's been in more leadership places, right? It is so amazing when someone's like, all right, that's your vision. Okay, I'm gonna go do the things. Like the Lornas of the world, the Obligers of the world are just like, oh, thank you. Like it's such an asset. And so there are times when I'm like, okay, I want to channel that part. I don't have to understand the why for everything, but I've had to like kind of make that decision
Yeah.
myself, right?
Yeah.
And so like this is the time when I'm going to show up and be like, and that's my why. See, I just named the why. I still have to have the why, but I can also harness it in a way so that I can show up in a way that's been so helpful to me when people show up and they're like, I'm there. I'm in. I'm going to do the thing without me having to explain everything to them. So
Yeah, yeah, so good.
that's fun too.
Well, and I think I've harnessed the questioner, right?
Right.
As I have spent time with you and have seen how that is actually super helpful at times too, right?
Yep.
So then I am more inclined to ask some questions when I need to, or when I feel like, hey, I might as well ask. What's the harm? Like the
Right.
worst they're going to say is no. I might as
Yep.
well ask, or whatever, right?
Yep.
So I feel like, and not only in those types of situations, but I do feel like my mind has been opened up to being a little bit more of a questioner because of our interaction and how I've seen things go. And I think, yeah. Anyway, it just has made a difference.
Yeah, I agree. And y'all, this is part of why we love Meeting of the Moms. This is why for over a decade, the two of us met in a bunch of iterations of different groupings or whatever. But it's been so amazing and helpful to learn and to grow in this way. And we hope that we're presenting the same kind of opportunities for you and that you're finding them with us and also with those you're interacting with. Thanks for coming to Meeting of the Moms. We hope it made your load a little lighter. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. Send your celebrations, takeaways, and suggestions for future topics to momswithamy.and.lorna@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. If this isn't the right fit for you, we wish you well on your journey. Until next time, I'm Lorna Adams.
And I'm Amy Rasmussen. See you next week at Moms.